to Beyond the Ring, a podcast that covers all things in the stock show industry from the informative to the insane. Starring Ryan Rash.
I honestly believe people can change on some level. However, ain't no one going from a zero to a hero.
And Dale Hummel.
Never regret a day in your life.
Now on with the show.
Welcome to Beyond the Ring. This is Dale Hummel, along with co-star Ryan Rash.
You just get a hello today. No hello. Just a hello. It's a very bad day.
Are you low on sleep, or where are you at?
No, Georgia is just terrible.
You've been telling me this was going to happen for a month. So
I
you should have
know.
been prepared.
I knew it was going to happen. There's a difference in knowing it was going to happen and then it actually happening.
Do you not feel like the Republican Party, outside of a few individuals, just kind of hung him out there and didn't jump in like they would have if they could have took control of the Senate?
I think if they could have kept it a tie, or if they could have won, like you said, if they could have took control, then maybe. But the last 3 days, they had Rick Scott there, Lindsey there. They had everybody there. Brian Kemp was doing everything. Again, and this is going to offend me, Herschel Walker is just a terrible candidate. I don't know who picked him, who vetted him, who did all these things. And again, I'm going to say when he announced, I thought, well, this is a slam dunk because I watched him give a speech at the Republican National Convention and did a great job. I thought he was one of the best speakers at the Republican National Convention. And I don't know if he practiced for 8 months on that one speech because he could not string together 2 coherent sentences. The whole campaign trail, all those ladies coming out. And again, when they picked him, they knew that Roe versus Wade was up in limbo. They didn't know which way it was going to go, but they knew that was the Supreme Court had that to decide on. And 5 people that come out say that he made him have an abortion. I just can't. I can't. I just see all these people that say that I need to run for public office. I don't agree with that. What I need to do is I need to be the person that when they decide so-and-so is going to run for senator in BFE, they need to bring them into me and give me 30 minutes with these people. And I can say, this is a no or this is a yes. That's what I need to do.
You would have to do more vetting, more research. Some people with you to do some of that deep research.
Evidently, they don't do this vetting because they let Herschel out there. And so there's enough op-ed research, whatever you want to call it, that you're supposed to when you're going to go for these things, the way I understand it. I've got pretty good information here. They set you down and you're supposed to bare your soul. I slept with 14 escorts when I was in my 20s, or, all the things that could possibly come up.
So you believe that actually happens?
Yes, I do believe that happens.
You make assumptions and it's not a bad idea to happen. I've never.
But the trick is that after you bare your soul, then they have the folder of all the shit that you didn't say. And you're like, well, what about this? I've got it on pretty good authority that actually happens. And
I think at the higher levels anyway. Maybe not,
right. I'm not talking about, for county commissioner, but
Crockett mayor. You probably
right.
Crockett mayor.
You would think that they've been like, oh, well, Herschel, did you have anybody have an abortion? Maybe, possibly. Okay, maybe we don't run you this cycle.
In defense of Herschel, who that person was that vetted Herschel, if you just look at his name recognition and the RNC speech, that's picking. I can get that, but I'm with you.
I'm with you on that name recognition and the RNC speech, but they had to dive deeper than that.
And you and I were both excited about that. We just thought, well, this is great, but we obviously
I thought it was a slam dunk, and then I heard him talk, and I was like, oh shit.
Well, obviously somebody wrote the speech, and maybe he contributed, but he had it down pretty well.
Yeah, no, he was good. So I don't know. It's terrible, but and I don't think people because people knew that even if Herschel won, it would be a tie, and Camel Toe would be the deciding vote. They still don't realize how critical that race is because now like the crazy lady from Arizona that sometimes votes Republican instead of, or goes against the Democrats, Sinema and Joe Manchin, they don't matter anymore. Like, even if they, I mean, they're out. Like, they've got they have 51. So, God knows what they're going to try to push through in these last 2 years.
Nope, I would agree with all of that. I heard I've had almost no news exposure, Ryan, and you're aware of this, so I'm guilty of not having a lot of information on what's been going on the past week. But I did hear a blip this morning, actually just before I sat down, that Biden was tossing out there that he did not have time to go to the border because he's dealing with something more important. And he cited specifically the economy and building a chip plant or bringing the chip manufacturing back to the United States. As you know, I'm not opposed to that. What I don't completely understand is he talked about a $30 or $40 billion project. And I didn't get any more than the headline, so I do not know enough to speak about this in any detail. But why? The last thing we need is a government-run chip plant. I'm sure that I can't imagine that's what it's going to be. I don't mind some type of tax break or some type of subsidy, and I even encourage it to bring that manufacturing back. But $30 to $40 billion of tax dollars going to it, when there's private companies out there that you would assume would jump into this with a little bit of tax benefits or a smaller subsidy, but it'll be interesting to see how that pans out. Anyway, Joe says he doesn't have time to go to the border because he's working on this. And if anybody thinks that's more important, they should speak up. And apparently at this point, nobody's speaking up. Joe has had a lot of time to go to the border since he took office. Can we both agree on
and
that?
not only that, but so this all got blown up this past week because, of course, the border's worse as it's ever been, but that's not anything new. Nothing's changed. But so he or Jean-Pierre, whatever her damn name is, somebody said something that, the question came up because the whole thing is there is no documented evidence ever in his however many long career that he's been in politics in Washington of him ever visiting the border. And either Joe said that wasn't right or the little press secretary said that wasn't right. So they've dug through this. They can't find any documented evidence that he's ever been to the border. This is why this all blew up. And then he did say that he's got more important things to do than the border and all this other stuff. And Jesus, but yeah.
And we're both against that many people coming across the border. But if you just isolate the gang members coming across the border or just isolate the amount of fentanyl, any one of 10 different things you could justify this is a serious issue, but they're just compounded one on top of each other and they continue to ignore it. And I think it's going to continue to grow. And at some point, there's not a good way to reverse it. And I'm afraid we're at that tipping point now that it's going to be very, very difficult. Think about all the people that have come through. I'm not talking about the good people that want to come here and make an honest living and will or will not go through the proper process, but I don't know if there is a process anymore. But I'm talking about the people that have come through that we do not want in this country. Ryan, I have no idea with our system how we're ever going to get them back out of the country.
You're not.
No, I don't think. You may get one or two here or there that committed a crime and actually got prosecuted. It just isn't going to happen. You're right. They're never going to leave this country, and they're going to continue to conduct acts that are going to be negative towards our country and our people and our citizens. And there's no route to get them out of the country.
No, there's no plan for that. And I think one of the interesting things that I do think will play into this next presidential election is because I think one of the things that, Republicans talk to the border crisis and all this other stuff, during the midterms, but I never heard anybody say, other than Carrie Lake, which she lost, and she was running for Arizona governor, she kind of had a plan on what she wanted to do in Arizona. But you can talk about the fact that inflation's the highest. You can talk about that the border's a mess and it's in crisis and all this other stuff. But just like you said, Dale, somebody's going to have to come up and say, this is my plan. This is what I'm going to do. And if, Trump's running, obviously, I don't think that Trump just saying we're going back to my border policies, I'm going to finish the wall, is going to be enough because of what you say. I think people are going to want to know, what are you going to do about the people for 4 years that came in here? What happens to them? And I don't know what the answer for that is, but
you know why you don't know what the answer is? I don't think there is one.
I
really don't think you could dig and root them out no matter what we do at this point. And that's that point of no return that we're kind of screwed.
Well, then you're going to have to say that. You're just going to have to say, yeah, I can't fix what he did. I can do this for the future, because I think that was one of the biggest problems on why the midterms were disappointing for the Republicans. They had all the things there, but they talked very little about how to fix the problems, or what their plan was to fix the problems that the Biden administration has caused. So
even the amount of fentanyl that's come across the border, Ryan, I think there's been, a small percentage of what's actually come across released into the population that it's a number that I don't think anybody even wants to try to comprehend. And without a monster task force in a large portion of the federal budget to root out the criminals that came across, to root out the drug dealers, to find the fentanyl and destroy it, I don't think it's possible.
Oh, good. And then I've had several people message me on, what do I think about Trump? Why haven't I talked out on, or, posted about Trump running on social media and all this other stuff? And again, because if I'm the jury, I'm still kind of out on what the thing is, what needs to happen here. And then again, yesterday, the Trump organization got found guilty on 17 counts of tax fraud. And again, Donald Trump's name's not associated with any of this, other than the fact that, like I told you, Dale, earlier when we were talking before we came on, was this when he was in office, when he was not a member of the Trump organization, because he had to sign away and step down and do all those things? When was this? What exactly are the fines going to be? What is the penalty? None of those questions are answered. It doesn't look good. I realize that. But until Biden decides what he's going to do, because Biden running or not running is a big thing. Because if Biden doesn't run, then that just opens the floodgates for all these other people in the Democratic side to run. The only one that I think is a threat or a decent chance would be Hillary. And this would be her, 14th time to run? But they have no one else. It's not camel toe, it's not butt plug, it's none of the people in the administration right now. And I don't see anybody on their bench, because they had 22 last time and Biden beat them all. Elizabeth Warren's not going to be it, all these things. So Hillary comes back, she runs. Trump was the only person that could beat Hillary back then. I don't know now, but then you've got to see, you notice that all these other Republicans, no one has said boo. You don't even hear anybody talking about running. Now, where you did hear things about, Nikki Haley or whatever, the only one that's still getting some whispers is DeSantis. But all these other people, there's nothing now. So I don't know.
It's pretty quiet. Well, I want to go back to those 17 charges real quick. And I know I have not looked into it near as much as you or seen anything about it. But I had mentioned to Ryan earlier, any individual or small business, let alone a corporation, to me, I think it would be unusual if there weren't 17 charges of some type of tax fraud or something wrong with any sizable organization. And Ryan had mentioned that the left, the media, has not picked up on this and just run with it. I'm under the impression it's probably not that serious of charges. And again, I'm just speculating here. But when the White House weaponizes the IRS, the FBI, all of these government agencies like they are, this, to me, the 17 number is almost a victory, because the weaponization, I guess, is what concerns me. Just think, if we turn the IRS loose on Joe and his family and all the money that Hunter brought in, I can't even imagine what would happen. So I think this is as hypocritical as it gets. And I think it's another, yet one more example, and you don't need another one, of the weaponization of the government agencies. And that concerns me drastically. So I don't know. It's not good. I assume it's not anything huge, or the media would be running with it.
Yeah. And so again, I'm not not backing Trump. I'm just waiting to, I think more than as much as I love Trump, and I do, I think he's the best president in my lifetime. And again, I think he'll probably, if he got another term, would do incredible things for the country. My bigger issue this round is we got to get the Democrats out of the White House. Like, it's just got to happen. And so who is going to be the person that can accomplish that? And so I'm kind of still, the jury's out on that right now. And I think the only person that could possibly beat Trump in the primaries is DeSantis. I don't know if he can, possibly. But I'm more concerned about what the other side's going to do right now and who is actually going to run and all that other stuff. And I find it, I mean, nobody, the problem on the Democrat side is they're all handicapped till Joe decides what he's going to do and until he makes an announcement.
And there'll be some new ones pop up, but I'm with you. I don't see one. I see Hillary coming in and saying, I'm doing this for the country. I'm doing this to save the day.
Yeah.
Is how she slides into it.
And then I mean, we say it's 2 years away, but 2 years is going to be pretty quick. But so something's going to have to give at some point. The only other thing that I have for current events, and I really haven't looked into it enough to be like whatever, but I guess there was some NFR cowboy who evidently cussed in an interview or something. And of course, everyone went crazy and blew it all up for him. So my point of all this is, okay, so maybe he used some bad language. Like, I'm not going to say that I don't use bad language. I try not to on this podcast, but other than that, whatever. But, when professional athletes kneel at the national anthem and all this other stuff, that's fine. But because some NFR cowboy cussed in an interview or whatever, he should go to hell. I think that's complete and total just bullshit.
Yep, not even worth bringing attention to. I'm with you.
I think it's worth bringing attention to because it's complete total bull. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not. I appreciate you bringing attention to the crap that's being put on it, but it shouldn't even have been on the radar.
No, yeah, again, like how is this a thing? Like, seriously. Yeah.
And we continue to put up with the woke bullshit and the disrespecting of the American flag. I get so angry about all that. I can't even get started with it.
Well, and
it gets nothing.
And then the other thing, so that happened, that instant. But like Yellowstone is the most watched TV show in the nation right now or whatever. And every other word out of their mouth is the F-bomb. Like, and that's perfectly fine. It's just, the hypocrisy just kills me.
Now I'm reaching for something positive, and the fact that it's so popular, doesn't that mean that there's still people out there that think like us in the livestock industry, that they maybe it's popular because it's so different? I don't know, but there's not a lot of woke crap being accepted there.
Oh no, but it's like so popular, and like I said, there's F-bombs everywhere. So how can that be the most popular TV? And then this is also like they're trying to like cancel this dude. I just don't. I don't.
And I had a chance to listen to a couple podcasts in my many nights in the truck here recently, and Joe Rogan is probably cusses a little bit in some of his podcasts, maybe a little. It seems to be the most popular one out there. So yeah, it just doesn't make sense sometimes. It really, really doesn't. So I'm gonna circle back. We haven't had a circle back. Oh. I'm happy. I don't like the reason that it's being brought up, and Ryan laid it out so clearly that Joe talked about getting this chip plant built and focusing on that. I think it's all crap to cover up the stuff that's going at the border. But I am appreciative. Remember, we talk about that 10-year plan to bring everything back here and get our essential production back to the Americas and out of China's hands. At least people have now heard that, hey, we're gonna build a chip plant. Well, what about maybe bringing some more of the pharmaceuticals back? either stop buying the damn Apple iPhone or get it back here into country, shut down TikTok. There's so many things that we could do. And I haven't mentioned, but again, Ryan, I had talked about this with my family. If I were to go and ever purchase an electric vehicle, you know that I'm going to Elon, right?
Oh,
and I had never thought about buying an electric vehicle, but I really appreciate. I know you think he's doing it for some other reason other than the good of the country, but I don't care what reason it is. I'm glad that Elon is standing up and doing what he's doing, and I appreciate it.
you and the Twitter files of it all. So, which again, I mean, he released those things about Hunter Biden's laptop and how it got censored and all this other stuff. And it's just vile. And I will say that it everybody talked about it this week on, it's not like they're hiding it, but I guess he's got more coming out on different things, but
yep. I think he was smart enough to release a little bit at a time to keep it relevant. Where I think that your little girlfriend in the White House, doesn't she say, well, that's old news. Why are we talking about this? That's right. Old news.
But I'm glad that the media is actually talking about it and covering it, but I just don't know what other than because Republicans have control of Congress. Other than investigations, the DOJ's not going to do anything.
No. It's a sad situation. I don't know who does anything. I at this point, the hands seem to be tied and they refuse to jump on things, whether it's the DOJ, the FBI. I never would have dreamed that those governmental agencies were so far controlled by the left. I just was unaware of it until this administration came into play.
And I guess the only thing that the one positive thing, if people do, like the American public at least will know now for sure that this was suppressed, it was censored, it was, again, I'm not ready to say that was like influence on the election, but it had a toll on it again. And so,
I think when it's that close, it had a huge toll. And in a race where there's a 5-point spread or 10-point, maybe not. I don't know, but in this situation was huge.
Right? Yeah. I mean, it definitely played a part in it. But maybe the good thing about it, if nothing's done legally, or at least the American public is now, if they've paid attention, their eyes have been open to the fact that it wasn't all fair and square and love and war in this last deal there.
Yes, and I think it's slowly seeping out into the public. There's a portion of the public that's never going to hear it. Right. They just aren't. They aren't going to get it. So that's interesting. Are you good in the current events of it all?
Sure.
Well, I would like to give a shout out to one of our past sponsors, Badger Brawl. Had a chance to go up there this past weekend, and incredible organization to get that many cattle through a ring, and the facility, everything positive. And I know sometimes Ryan and I will point out some of the things we want to change in the industry, but under at least at this particular show, and thinking about moving that many families in and out and that many head in and out of the ring, and the organization behind it all to put it on as professional as they did, I guess it's enjoyable thought just to think about. Wow, we still have shows that are that organized, that are putting on events for families in the stock show industry that they go participate in. And not everything's going to be perfect, but when you put effort into it and do the best you can, and I think they absolutely did that, it's appreciated. We need to have show management put as much into it as they can. And we know they're almost, for the most part, all volunteers, and it's a lot of effort. So appreciation going up to the Badger Brawl. And there's one other thing, Ryan, I about forgot in current events. Do you know what is not made in China?
No.
Show Fresh H2O.
Oh, really? Shocking.
You did know that. American made, backed by science. You want your cattle to drink. You want your lambs, goats, pigs to drink and be hydrated. Look the part in the ring. Give Show Fresh H2O a chance. Local supply trailer and swampfox.com. Thank you for continued support of the Beyond the Ring podcast. Greatly appreciated. Do you have any BTR JLA news you would like to bring in?
I'm going to do right now the top 10 overall hog. First place is Hunter Stevens, 510. Second place, Bella Herrera with 500. Third place, Avery Layton, 485. Fourth place, Shaylee Davis with 470. Fifth place, Easton Zerbach, 405. Sixth place, Martin Svedberg, 385. Next is Ainsley Erickson with 345. Ava Valerie, 335. Natalie Thompson, 334. And Emily Hemphill is in 10th with 324. And just so y'all know, the rankings here are Arizona, California, Oregon, Arizona, Oregon, Arizona, California, Ohio, Arizona, Ohio. So Arizona is like whipping everybody in the nation in the hog world.
Wow. And they've been up there in several categories.
Yeah. So just, put that out there. And then as we're rounding out the first ever BTR JLA point share, I want to give a shout out to our overall national sponsors. The All Around was sponsored by Old Wood Limited. Cattle was Langford, Hereford, and Hybrid. Sheep was Platten, Shelton Livestock. Pigs was McGrew Equipment, and goats were S&R Meat Goats. So we thank them for their sponsorship in 2022.
Yes, thank you. Greatly, greatly appreciated. The main topic, common courtesy. And we're going to relate this a little bit to the stock show ring, but I had an experience this week, right? I'm going to probably throw in there that doesn't necessarily hold true to just relating it to the stock show world. But when we talk about common courtesy, and we're going to shows, and we can apply this to everyday life, but we're going to target when we're going to shows, unloading, getting through the shows, all those things. And I think in general, and again, Ryan and I are bringing out things that we want to try to do better, and also trying to point out the positive and the positive side of this. For the most part, to stage, and just like I talked about the Badger Brawl, there's a lot that takes place from the family standpoint to get the animals ready, to get them there, to get them in and out and back home. A lot on the show management side of things. There's just a lot involved. And we're going to go through and just talk about things that most of us in the show ring are already doing, and others maybe we need to work on a little bit to try to continue to make it better. And it's never going to be perfect, but I think we have something really good going here, and I think we can continue to try to do better. Ryan, I'd like to start with one, and I'm going to say I am guilty of several of these things. I want to be very upfront, not to be a hypocrite here. But one of the biggest issues when we go to some of the larger shows, Ryan, and in Texas, you're always going to hear about this because the majors are such long staging lines and unloading lines and so forth. But even at our national shows, and even some of the jackpot shows that are larger, we have to wait in line to unload and wait our turn to get the livestock in there. We're all waiting. Let's say we're at a national show, we're in line for 12 plus hours or whatever it may be. And we finally get to that facility we're going to unload at. We're backed up. We get the stock off. We get them their pins. And then we start unloading equipment and so forth. Myself, and I'm going to use myself as an example, and I'm looking around me. I think others are very similar. Once we get there, yeah, we're in a hurry to get those animals off the trailer and get them settled and comfortable. And we want all that to happen. But more times than not, I'll find myself or our family unloading things and getting them to the pins or our little fitting area or whatever that may be there that we're going to, and focus on maybe even a little bit of organization when we're setting things in there, rather than just getting everything off the trailer and getting the trailer out of there so the next person can come in. Does that make any sense to you?
Oh yeah, no, I mean, in Texas major shows, like literally you're unloading thousands and thousands of animals and all the equipment that comes with it. So I mean, they're pretty good at Texas major shows about, like, I would say, hurrying you along very forcefully in terms of getting your stuff unloaded and out as quick as possible. But, I'll just take, for instance, Showgrounds here. I'm in College Station this week because it's Callie's birthday, and so that's what I'm here for. But at their Showgrounds, the way that you have to unload, you pull through this line and all this other stuff, and we've been there at a million different shows, and not just state shows, jackpot shows, whatever. And like, if that person that's at the front of that line tunnel takes 2 hours to unload, nobody behind them can pull out around them and stuff like that. So it's very bothersome at times that regardless of whether it's a national show or a jackpot show, even if you haven't been in line long, get your stuff, get it unloaded, and move on, because there are going to be people that need you to move it along so they can get unloaded. And again, I think at the jackpot shows, we don't think it's as big a deal, but we're talking about common courtesy. And, you know, you can get your show box and your trim chute or what, you know, trim stand, all that stuff organized later. But if you would just get it out of the trailer and onto the grounds and then move on in like that 10, 15 minutes that you were going to spend organizing, setting that up after you drop off your trailer, nobody's probably going to come up and say thank you, but there is going to be somebody that benefits from that.
Absolutely. And I'm going to say we're guilty in the Texas majors. There's crews at most of them, Ryan, and I haven't unloaded all of them, but there's crews there to help get that stuff out of there. I mean, you're getting the stuff off the trailer, and as they're pushing it to your pins, that trailer's leaving. I mean, that's their ideal. They're trying to get that, and you would have a hard time at least some of those hanging out there and stalling like we can get away with at some of these national shows. And at the national shows, they're encouraging you to get going, but they're not enforcing it, and they shouldn't have to. It should be us as exhibitors. But I guarantee you, most of the shows that we go to, and I'm going to throw my guilt out there, we could be unloaded. We could get that truck and trailer in and out of there in half the time if we made it a priority to do so.
I agree with that.
And if everybody did that, we've cut half that waiting time out. And that's one of the, if there's one thing that I hear from a lot of people, they say, what would we change about this show? It's that's always on the radar. It just is. And you know what? I'm not pointing fingers at show management at all. Sometimes we can reorganize things to make it smoother and make it better. But for the most part, it's the exhibitors that just need to get the crap off the trailer and get out of there, and including myself. So do you have anything that you would like to bring in on next on this one, Ryan?
So my thing, I don't know if this may just be a personal pet peeve or whatever, but two things, and they have to deal with Dale's favorite thing in the world, water. When you're at these shows, sometimes water is like finding a place to plug in, to hook up your hose, etc. They may not be real plentiful around shows. And so we always take a splitter with us and attach that first and then hook our hose to one side of it, whatever. So that way two people at least can put a water hose on there on those things. And again, that's not a huge deal, but it's helpful for somebody else, because again, there's a lot of times where you just don't have a whole, or you have to have so many hoses to find, a place to hook up. So if you do, just buy a splitter, take it with you and hook it on there so somebody else can also use that water outlet. The other thing, and my big pet peeve, is when we're in the wash rack, and I don't think anybody does this on purpose, but I also don't think people pay attention. Wash the animal, not the people all around you. Like, I can't tell you the number of times that I have been soaked, or I have seen people been soaked, and it's nothing other than the person is just not really paying attention to their surroundings in the wash rack. And they're just, I don't even know if they're concentrated on washing that animal or whatever, but like, you've got people all around you that they took showers that morning. They don't need you to give them another one in the wash rack. So, little common courtesy in terms of wash rack use would be greatly appreciated.
Oh, and Ryan, when you were showing, I can't only imagine that I would hope that some of that wasn't accidental. I hope they targeted you.
Oh, that's so nice, Dill.
But you're right. I think we've talked about this, maybe just you and I, not on the podcast, but I think we've talked about the wash rack etiquette, and it happens a lot. I can remember coming down from one of the banquets at Louisville, whether it was the Skillathon or the collegiate judging contest, and we had goats showing. And I went out and helped our youngest daughter. Katie had one on the wash rack, so I took over so she could go get another one. And I'm in my sports jacket and dressed up pretty well on the wash rack. And I had a show mom on one side and I think an exhibitor getting ready on the other side. And they were the most courteous. So if you put a sports jacket on, it draws attention to it. They don't bother you. The most courteous that I've ever seen.
I don't
So
think
all
everybody's going to do that, but that's a nice idea.
No, probably not. Outlets, Ryan. And again, I'm going to admit guilt every single time here because the first thing you and I have talked about this, when I get to a show, I'm going to try to secure enough outlets that I think we need to get through the show, primarily the power that the blowers take.
Mm-hmm.
So that is high on the list. So this is usually more of obviously the cattle are going to use the blowers. I don't know if the pig people need that much power. Obviously going to want some, but it's a big issue across the board for the most part. And there's very few shows because these blowers and double blowers take so much power. There's very few shows that are set up with circuits that can handle that. So not only do you need that one outlet to plug into, but you probably are looking for a backup because you know you're going to blow one of them. If you got to call a maintenance person to come get that when that breaker flipped, it could be an hour and you're fitting and trying to get ready for the show. So this is a pretty big deal. And somehow it always manages to work itself out through the showtime. And I'm not always sure how, because unlike some of the cattle shows, we're not at least at the smaller animal, the sheep and goat shows, most of the national shows, we can't bring obviously the generators inside and we're too far to run cords from the outside. So we're pretty much reliant on the power that's provided there. So I guess where I'm going with this is take what you need, but let's not overkill it and make sure that others have some power source. And this is real and it's a challenge and it's always a battle. And I understand that the shows can't rewire everything to make it work. The facilities that are maybe a little bit newer work a little better and we work through it. But we've got to be conscious that let's try to make sure that everybody can get enough power. And after the first day that we're there and we realize that maybe 2 families or 3 families are on the same circuit, we've got to be smart. We can only click those double blowers. And if we go to put 2 of them on one circuit, most of the time, it's not going to work. So let's not only not hoard the power stations or the outlets, but let's just coordinate a little bit with the others. And I know this is a difficult thing to do because we're washing and fitting at different times or sometimes at the same time, but we just got to be smart about it. If we kick all those blowers on that are on one circuit at the same time, we're going to blow that circuit. And depending on whether or not we can go flip that breaker, which most of the times at the national show, we can't do those things or national shows. We have to call a maintenance person in and it's going to take a while and it's going to handicap all of us. So we'll try to be smart about that.
At the major shows and stuff where you can't use generators, this doesn't make any sense or apply. But when you're at a jackpot show and you brought your own generator, you know exactly how much that can pull, what it can pull, whether it's fans, blowers. Again, if you brought your generator and you're going to use it, then don't take all the electrical outlets inside the barn in your stalling area too, because there are going to be people that don't have generators. I'm not saying the generator can pull everything, but you know what it can pull, so you don't have to use all of the electricity in your stalling area at that jackpot. Again, just a little common courtesy and things helps out, because just like Dale said, it doesn't matter if it's a national show or a great facility, or, you know, some of these jackpot shows, facilities are older, not as up to date. If you keep flipping breakers all day long, that's not going to help anybody.
No. And like at the Illinois State Fair, I mean, it's without generators. Fortunately, we can use generators in the sheep and the goat side. The barns are set up where we can bring cords in from the outside, but there's some of these facilities that they cannot handle it, and you're almost going to have to bring a generator. And it always amazes me, Ryan, and more so when I first started going to the Texas majors, but they're limited on space, they're limited on power, they're limited on all these things. And in the sheep and lamb world of things, and I'm assuming the pig world of things, and I haven't paid as much attention to the cattle side, but you don't have a blower in the majors. I don't think any of the majors on the sheep and goat side, maybe Fort Worth. Yeah, Fort Worth, we can have them outside, maybe in the wash rack. But for the most part, they've eliminated everything that's going to take any significant amount of power. I believe we can use cordless clippers, not plug-in clippers, because you could not get that many exhibitors hooked up with power all at the same time. Just impossible, basically, I guess is what it comes down to. So we can adjust and we can make things work, and we have to realize that it just is what it is. So let's work with what we have. We talked about wash rack space, Ryan. I already kind of we hit the wash rack courtesy.
No, I just talked about the people that's like wash humans instead of their animals. That's what I
Yes. And I think we can expand on that a little bit. And sometimes we'll have hoses hooked up. I mean, we'll go hook our hose up and forget it every time. But we have to realize that if there's 10 wash rack spaces at a national show for a lamb or goat event, and there's 10 hoses hooked up there, the 10 people that have those hoses hooked up, they're going to have to allow others to use them. And I think 99% of the time that all works. And sometimes we'll put a lamb or goat stand back there to work on. And I guess on this one, I want to compliment people more than say, hey, we can do better. And I'm sure we can do better in places. But for the most part, when you pull up there and grab a hose that's not yours because there's nowhere to put your hose, or even if there's nobody using a stand and you hop a lamb or goat up there and use that stand to wash, most people are really good about it. There's very few times where I've been approached by somebody when we're using their hose and or their stand, or if they're using ours, that it's an issue. As long as when they get that animal off, we're allowed to get back in there and use that stand and so forth. So there's some cooperation going on there. Depending on the space and the size of the wash rack, we can always do better, and we need to kind of keep that in mind. But for the most part, I think we do a nice job. I don't know on the cattle side, Ryan, where it takes significantly more time. I know we're always waiting in line to wash, say at the Cattle Congress or wherever it may be. Probably a little more of an issue on that side of things.
Well, and the one, again, I think, and I do not want people to think that I'm picking on junior show people, because I'm not. I'm just stating facts. Cattlemen's Congress, you just talked about that, and you always take pins and animals and stuff like that. By and large, the open shows, it's so much better in the wash rack than it is the junior shows, because those people have it down. And that's just all there is to it. I mean, they do this for a living and all this. They've got it down pat. And, cattle people, once you get your spot, if you've got 3 or you got 18, normally in an open show scenario is they know how long it takes to wash one, so they'll bring the next one and you give them the one that's wet and put the next one in there. And so it just works out real well. Junior shows, I'm just going to be quiet.
Go ahead. Just go ahead.
It's literally like the Hunger Games. I'm serious. It's just nuts. I mean, people will get into fights over hoses and spots. And again, like if you tried the system of we've got 6 steers here and we're going to wash all 6 of them, but you're going to bring, and this person in your group brings one and they're like, oh, you can't do that. Well, I got this spot, so yeah, I can. I mean, it's just crazy, but there's no absolute protocol there, but I think the open shows have it worked out so much better. At least on the cattle side, it is so much better. It is just so much better.
It is, and like you said, that and when we have a pin of bolts, we have the next one basically there at the wash rack when that one's finishing. I can see if you don't have enough people and you've got one that you're washing, and you take that one, you lead it back and get it situated and try to get another one up there, and there's a lot of downtime where there's people waiting and there's nobody using that spot. I don't know about that part. We need to keep an animal in a position in the wash rack all the time. But that, you're right, at the junior shows, when you have several to do and you're trying to hold one spot like you would in an open show, that doesn't always go well.
It's mess.
Just a mess. What about when we're in the ring, Ryan? And we've addressed this before, and I'm constantly being made aware of this. And at some of the earlier cattle shows, like the one this past weekend, these cattle are not as acclimated to the show ring and a little feisty and wanting to misbehave or get away a little bit and not always going to stop where you want them to, but trying to leave enough space. And I know we've talked about this between you and the exhibitor in front of you. And again, to me, that's common courtesy not to crowd that person, but it's not always easy to do in the cattle ring when it's one of your first shows that you're going into. But for the most part, in the lamb and the goat ring, we can stop those animals pretty much wherever we want. And sometimes you'll still see them really jamming up. Now, maybe it's a young kid that doesn't understand, is getting pushed around a little bit. We can give some excuses for that and understand that. But some of our older showmen that know it, we've got to give a little more space just so we're not crowding those people ahead of you. It just doesn't work. And Ryan, I think I've heard you talk about this at least after some of the shows you've judged, maybe not on here.
No, I think spacing is a big deal. And again, one thing that I think that needs to be brought up about this is, again, I think you need to know your ring. If you've got a small ring and you're going to have classes of 6 to 10, then you're probably going to have to be a little tighter on spacing. If you've got a huge ring and the classes are still 6 to 10, it's a little different. But this is where parents and mentors and leaders, breeders, brokers, all the stuff, when we say go to the ring, check out the situation, know the drill, all of these things go into that. And so, again, I'm not expecting an 8-year-old kid to walk up there and go, okay, so I can figure out the spacing all on myself. But if your parents up there or whatever be like, hey, things may be a little tighter here because this is a small ring and there's going to be lots of animals, stuff like that, just so they have an awareness level about them, of what to expect or what to do. And then, I judge shows all the time, and so I get new pet peeves every week. But I'll be honest with you, I was judging a show just in the recent past, and it was a huge ring, and classes weren't very big, and these kids kept just using the entire arena, and I kept saying, "Go halfway down, just go halfway down and cut over." If there's 3 head. And it's literally a ginormous. You don't want me watching your animal walk that long, okay? I promise. It will not work out well for you. I will find something structurally wrong with your animal. But just know where you're at and know the thing. And again, if the judge is telling you, "Hey, just go halfway down and cut over," you probably need to do what the judge tells you.
No, absolutely. And I think it's going to vary quite a bit from show to show and ring to ring. And it's all, if we could get the exhibitors to come and watch those first couple classes, and if they're old enough to understand, great. If not, a parent or somebody come with them and just go through the mechanics and all of that. And again, Ryan, can you remember a show that you've been to that you didn't have a kid come into the ring midday or later that still weren't sure where they're going to go? And that's a bad feeling for the kid, isn't it? They don't feel good about it. It's not a positive experience. Let's make sure to do that. It's our responsibility, especially with the younger kids, that we take them up there and we explain those. Let's make this as positive as we can. And if they're out in the ring and they feel a little confused or lost, I promise that's not a good feeling for them.
No, it can't be. But again, there are ways to prevent it. So, and I blame, or I lay that responsibility. I'm not going to say blame. I relay that responsibility on either the parents or the people there that are in charge of said exhibitor and animal to make sure that they go up there, they show them, they keep them aware of what's going on. So there's that. And then, again, I'm sure, Dale, you probably wanted to bring this up, but I don't know if you're forgetting, but we're talking about common courtesy, and this is kind of what sparked some of this. So, and again, this is probably going to ruffle somebody's feathers, and that's fine.
I have it down. I was waiting for the end for the finale for mine. You jump in.
But if you have an animal or animals that have fungus or mites or you just name it. There's lots of things that can go wrong. Don't take them to the show. Just don't. Just don't do it. Don't. Because the people around you don't deserve their animals getting that when they didn't have it. And again, I could say the same thing for ringworm and cattle. I don't think it's quite as
I don't know
contagious.
that that's on the same level.
I was going to say, it's not quite as contagious, but I don't want people to think that I'm just giving cattle people a pass, okay? Because I'm not. It's not quite as contagious as this other stuff, but I just don't understand. There's another show next weekend when you get your pest problem under control. Okay, therefore I said it.
Well, I can expand on that, and again, and I don't think we have a lot of those kind of issues. I'm sure there's some issues in pigs.
Lies.
No, in the pig side, I'm trying to address each species a little bit, and I can't think of just here's a ongoing issue with the pigs, and I'm sure there are some. The cattle, the ringworm, there's a lot of cattle that show with ringworm. And Ryan, when you say that it's almost a little more accepted, cattle are going to have ringworm and it just is what it is. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but that's kind of if you have a spot of ringworm on your calf up on his head or neck, you're not thinking I've just taken myself completely out of the show. I don't have a chance. Where if we have it on lambs and goats, or whether it's ringworm or fungus or staph, it's more of an issue, and it seems to take away from the appearance. If they've got quite a bit, the freshness, the handle, all of those things. So we have to be conscious of it. And you know, we've had so much staph in the goat thing and so much fungus in the lamb thing that it's a difficult situation. And I don't want shows to be as picky as, say, the American Royal was several years ago, where, I mean, one little bump that was maybe from months ago that's long healed, you're probably not going to get through. There has to be a compromise there. I think if we're covered in staph or fungus or ringworm and it's noticeably active, we probably don't need to have them at the show. As an exhibitor, you probably don't need to bring it. As a show manager, we probably shouldn't allow it. And it seems like it's hard. We don't have many shows that are super critical, and we've sat goats on the sideline that had a spot here or there that maybe we tried to get in, or we left home because we knew we weren't going to get in. That, man, I'd have liked it to have shown that one. And I understand it. And I understand all the time. And maybe that's your targeted show. So there's a balance there somewhere. I can't say just it's going to be on an individual basis, but where that is, and we can't rely on the show management to do it all. We have to be a little bit, take personal responsibility as exhibitors. We returned from a show not that long ago, and I knew it was going to happen. I tried to take preventative measures. We had a couple goats pinned basically on the back side of us that had mites so bad that the damn things were almost anemic. And I'm not exaggerating here. And goats get mites. We're going to have lice. We're going to have different things on there. And sometimes you're not even going to notice it if it's a low level and it's just part of it. But when they're eaten up by it, itching, biting at themselves, where they're causing themselves to bleed, we've got to implement some common sense and say, we just need to stay home. And I'm sure some of these people, maybe it's their first year or so and they don't even realize what's going on. Maybe the common courtesy is another exhibitor around there say, hey, I don't know if you're aware, but there's a terrible mite problem here, or fungus problem, or whatever. That may not be taken real well, but I don't know how better to educate some of the exhibitors on those things. But let's say you're the family that comes in clean and you get mites, you get staph, whatever it is, because of one next year, or just it being in the barn, and you're planning to go on to another show. You're spending so much time when you get back home to manage and fix or control the issues that you may have brought home from the show. And I know that's part of the risk of going out. And we very much limit how many shows we go to, because I'm not comfortable taking that risk too close to that targeted show. But we have to use some common sense and try to get better about it. And I know there's so much staph going around. I'm not saying that if we've got a spot of staph or here that's maybe just starting and we didn't know it coming in, or has been there a while and the hair hasn't come back. I'm not saying we need to be overboard crazy about what we do and don't take, but let's reel it in. And if it's bad, let's just leave them home. I think it's our best direction to go with that. I do have another one, Ryan, and that one I really wanted that you brought up there. I appreciate it.
I just want to add one thing. And again, Dale's talking about how this may be your targeted show and stuff like that. And I get that there are judgment calls that have to be made. Two things. When I said there's another show next weekend, I meant it's a jackpot show. I just don't think that if you got a pest problem on your animals, you have to go to the jackpot show. And then the other thing that I forgot to mention on cattle, you brought up lice. If your steer or heifer has lice, don't go. Just don't do it. I mean, there's, again, in reason, because that is very contagious. And I can't, every show we go to when we were doing this, even if we didn't see one with lice, we doctored for it when we got home, just in case.
No, and it takes a lot of time and effort to try to. We're doing a lot of preventative that we're having to do a lot of things that we shouldn't. Maybe is the best way to put it. If everybody would just put some common sense into it and try to be courteous and not expose everybody else to what you may have. And again, I'm not talking about every little thing. I mean, we're talking about some issues that we know if we go, we're going to give this to a lot of other people. And that's very simple. We just don't do that. One thing I didn't bring in, I meant to when we talked about the outlets, Ryan, that's one of the things that I target and make sure that we have enough power once we get there. But the biggest battle, and everybody wants to get there early in line, and part of it is to get pins where they want them. And I understand maybe that's important so we don't have as long a walk to the show ring, or we want to be away from others, whatever it may be. I understand that. But another big part of it is people are trying to put the boundaries down for their fitting area, for their fitting space, because we have a lot of people showing, and a lot of times there's not enough room. So you're trying to get there and mark out your fitting space and try to gather that. In most of the situations, not all, but most, there is not enough room. And when you're going to that national show or whatever show it may be, that it's going to be tight. So if you get there and you've only got a couple animals, we don't need a 30 by 40 space or whatever you're taking up, because we want our snack table here and we want 10 chairs just in case everybody wants to sit down at the same time. We don't need all of that under certain circumstances. If there's enough room, I'm all for it. I love it that the kids can get together and hang out in one area. I think that's all good. That's part of the positive experience from the stock show. But in a lot of cases, there's just not that much room, yet there's still people taking up that much space proportional to how many animals that they have there they have to fit. We'll have camps come in sometimes and take up a huge amount of space. Sometimes it's needed because they have that many animals there. Other times it's definitely overkill. And in some situations, if you have a camp, and for an example, if we go to a show, we're going to offer to help fit and prepare any of them that we sold or those families that we sold to. So we may have 3 or 4 stands or 5 stands set up in a relatively small area, and then all those families are allowed to use those stands. And instead of having 15 stands in the barn for that amount of families, we may only have 5. So sometimes when the breeders or the camps are setting up, sometimes it actually helps condense things down. And other times we take up so much space that there's just not enough room. And we've got to be conscious of that. Another one, and again, I'm not trying to take away from the stock show experience, but we get into situations where they're playing football in the alleyway, and I'm all for that. But let's be conscious that if we've got stock coming through there, we don't need to be throwing that ball close to them or doing things that are gonna spook them. So not just footballs. What are the balls on the string, Ryan, that we throw out and they come back to us? I don't even know.
You're asking the child that never played with toys in life. So,
but you've seen these walking through the barns. They were everywhere at Louisville. And I can remember my kids used to have. They just do. There's nothing wrong with that. Go out in the concourse at Louisville and use them there. We just got to be conscious. We don't need to be throwing them in front of animals and things like that. So I'm not trying to take the toys away from our exhibitors or that experience away. Let's just use some common sense with it. And Ryan, one more, and I keep coming up with more as we're talking about things. And I like to use the Texas Majors as an example because a lot of people haven't been there and experienced that and how it's maybe different from some of the state fairs and other national shows. But when we talk about fitting space in trying to hoard that area up, well, guess what? When you're in the pig and the sheep and goat and even in the cattle side, it gets obviously crowded. We may have 2 exhibitors, 3 exhibitors in the situation at Fort Worth at times with the lambs or goats all in the same pen. Maybe they have pin dividers, maybe they don't. You're expected to have all of your feed and equipment within that pin, whether it's a shelf that you attach to the pin. There's no room outside of your little pin to do anything. The alleyways between the pins are pretty tight and pretty narrow. And when people get their animals out to feed, because we can't feed when we're in a group of others in that pen in the alleyway, you can't hardly get a lamb to fit to go around that one that's eating. It's a challenge, and there's no other way to put it. But guess what? It would be interesting to me that if we took the space, the amount of limited space that we have at most of the Texas Majors to one of our other national shows and made exhibitors work within that space, I think they'd go crazy. I really do. I think it's what you're accustomed to and what you understand. But we can do better. We can condense down and we can be courteous. And at the Texas Majors, I'm not saying there aren't conflicts and people fighting for some space, but it's pretty well accepted that there just isn't any. And when you're even trying to walk down an alleyway and you have especially lambs are bigger than goats, you have 4 or 5 lambs in an alleyway that are all eating, there's not hardly enough room to even walk behind those lambs to get from point A to B. Yet not a lot of conflict. People just make it work, and we cooperate. So this is maybe not something we can do better, but acknowledging that we can do this. We just have to accept this is where we are, and be courteous to each other, and try to make things work.
And the spacing deal, like you're talking about, I think that goes at every show. Again, we all want to have our fitting area and all this other stuff, but again, kind of like knowing the ring and what the size is, for everybody to get accomplished what they want to accomplish at a show, you're going to have to make adjustments and be courteous to the people around you in terms of stall space, in terms of fitting space, all of those things. And just this whole topic, some of you will say it's more common sense than common courtesy, but I think it's kind of both. And I do think that you have no idea the impact of those little bitty things that you do to help other exhibitors, even though it may go unnoticed or unappreciated. Like, somebody's probably not going to come up and say, hey, thank you for doing this, this, and this. It's going to make everyone's experience at the show a lot better.
Absolutely. And the unnoticed, or we're just not sure of something, just like the unloading, Ryan, I'm going to say, and maybe I'm wrong, but I think we can cut our time in half on what we talked about earlier in terms of unloading. And just think, if our unload time, that staging time in line, if everybody did it and we just cut it in half, that's huge. I mean, just things that are going to make our lives as show families better. And maybe we need to move towards what Arizona National does in terms of, here's designated fitting space and you can purchase that space. I don't like having to spend more money for it, but all of a sudden, here's your space and that's what you have. And you're not trying to get there 2 days before to sneak in the barn and tape off whatever you're taping off and all those things. It takes some of that anxiety away, that you're not worried about what you have. I don't know what the best solution is. I think each individual show and each facility, depending on their space, just needs to adjust. And Ryan used the term common sense. They need to implement that, but we do as exhibitors as well. And I think we can continue to find better ways to do it and just make it work for everybody. Be courteous is where we're at.
Like you're saying, Arizona National's got a system and they've got what they do and all this stuff. I want to bring this up because I think it kind of fits in. I did a poll on Facebook the other day about what was the most important factors that made you decide where to go to a show. And the large majority was the location and, the date. But I think I had the options were location, date, awards, payback, judges. I think that was the ones. Of course, just like on everything, people ad-libbed and put other things in there. I will say, and there was like almost 700 comments on this thing. I will say, and I think they're meaning more for like jackpot shows. A lot of people put in there that they don't like the extra fees of pin fees, fitting space fees, all this other stuff. And I think, again, I'm not bashing Arizona National. I'm thinking this was more because this post was about jackpot shows. But that came up quite a bit. So that's just throw that out there to y'all running shows, etc. It is something that is definitely people are making decisions about whether to go to shows on those things.
Absolutely. When I think about what shows we're going to go to, how high my anxiety level is going to be at that show, and a lot of it's just getting the animals unloaded and getting your space. A lot of it's that. Once we get all situated and the animals are in, it kind of comes down a little bit. But if it's such a battle, where to me and for many of those out there that have anxiety issues, it's sometimes just not worth it. I'm just not going because I don't want to fight that battle. I don't want to deal with all that. So let's do our best as show managers and everybody else to do things. And Ryan, we better wrap up because I keep thinking of more things. There is you talked about, you every time you go to a show you find maybe something. Wow, I wish we could do this a little bit different. Here's a pet peeve of mine, and this is selfish. This is whatever you want to call it. But when we get to one of the bigger shows and we get those animals in, and I've talked about this on here before, I want to get water in them, feed them, whatever I need to do, and make sure that's done. And then I want them to lay down and go to sleep. I want them to rest, period. They're in a new place. They're probably not going to sleep well. all those things, and they need their rest just like a person does. If you want to look the part, they need to sleep. So I get them all in, and then all of a sudden, here's a group of people for some reason wants to stand right in front of those pins and kind of screw around or visit or whatever. And I get it. And that's part of the social aspect of the show. Maybe I'm not social enough, but when we have people standing up against or leaning up against those pins, those goats aren't going to lay down and sleep. And that concerns me. Where that group of people could move just a little bit and those not maybe affect some of those animals. And I know other exhibitors and families maybe aren't concerned with this at all, but it bothers me. And I want to make sure everything's done as best we can to make sure we have a good day in that arena. And the other thing I find, and I can go both ways with this, most shows will leave those lights on all night. Most of the time at home, we're shutting those lights off, and those animals are going to get a pretty good night's sleep and are used to having the lights off. Now, when we turn the lights off, some things that shouldn't happen may happen because we have a segment of our industry and a very small percentage that are doing things they should not do. And I don't even want to go down that path at this moment. But if I have the opportunity and maybe lights are on sections, for example, at our state fair, I'll try to shut the row of lights off that's over top of our pins, just so those animals can get a good night's sleep. So it goes so much deeper into things, and maybe I'm overthinking everything, and I tend to do that just a little bit. But there's a lot of things we can do, and Ryan summed it up the best, just as far as using some common sense. The little things that we can do are going to make a bigger difference, and maybe we're not going to get a thank you for it, but it's just the right thing to do. With that, Ryan, we're going to conclude on our common courtesy, and it's time for question and answer. We have a gentleman that and I'm not the best about locating all the questions that coming in and summarizing and getting them down and picking between them. But James actually submitted a question, and I scrolled up just a little bit. And he submitted a question previously that I didn't get to. I think they're both good questions. So one person, Ryan, is going to get two questions today. Oh, the first one is, and we've touched on this a little bit, how much does an animal breed play a role in your decision in the Supreme Drive? For example, say you have an Angus heifer and a key heifer in your top two. Let's say the key heifer's only slightly better quality. You go with the Angus heifer because she's purebred over the slightly better key heifer who may only be a very low percentage. And how and where do you draw the line in your head? Ryan, I know your answer, but I'd love to hear it.
And I think his question's a little whacked, just to be honest with, because
well, we have another one, so he can redeem himself.
He's calling the Angus a purebred and the key a crossbred, but for her to be a key, she's purebred to the Key Association. So that really doesn't factor in. He does state
is a very low percentage key.
It doesn't matter. She's got papers, and she's showing as a key. Okay. So therefore,
but she's not a purebred, and it's a good thing we're going to have a topic.
I could probably tell you that the Angus may not be a purebred either, big dog.
Yes, there is a case to be made.
Okay, so I don't think that matters. What I think the breed for me matters a lot, because I do this 3-part system, and I've said this before. It is which one is the very best that day, which one for their breed is the best and going to be the most competitive at a national show among that breed type, and then which one can I win the most with. And you got to win your breed before you win the show. So yeah, how good they are for their breed is a very, very important factor for me. And I am the guy that uses as many, whatever you want to call off or minor breeds as anybody for that reason, because those are my 3 criteria when I pick a Supreme. But again, and we're going to talk about this next week, breed purity. But anyway, the whole thing is like saying a low percentage key isn't as a purebred as an Angus or whatever. They have a breed at that show. They have a junior national, whatever. And so it's purebred enough to get papers. So that does not factor into it for me at all. The other part, how good they are for their breed, huge factor.
The determining factor for you.
Yes. Absolutely.
And I knew that was coming, but would you say, and if you're to the other shows you watch, I don't think there is a standard for that. I think each judge is going to be individual. And I think that's what brings James's question up is sometimes as exhibitors or show families, we expect all judges to be on the same path. And that is so far from the truth that we just aren't.
That's the biggest misconception. in stock shows, is that all judges should be pretty close or whatever. And again, I go back to the Nally judging contest and what Britton Jennings said. There was 6 people on his committee, 6 people on my committee, all competent, educated, all the things that you want, right? And yet we had so many differing opinions. And so that is still the biggest misconception in livestock shows, is that regardless of who judges, that it's all going to be pretty much the same. That couldn't be farther from the truth. And going back to that Facebook poll, there was one person that commented, judges aren't a factor because you should be able to win under every single judge. They should never announce judges till the day of the show, etc. And a lot of people commented on that person's comment, and I would agree with what they said. That's just not right.
No, it's wrong.
Yeah, I mean, you might win under Brent Jennings in Ring A, but you may not win under Ryan Rash in Ring B. And it doesn't make his opinion right or my opinion wrong. It's just how it is, because it is just opinion. And maybe that is a topic later, is just that misconception, but there you go.
I think that'd be great. I think that'd be a great one to talk about. And there's a lot of reasons why certain people are going to use animals they use. Some for some good reasons, some not so good. Yeah. And no, that'd be a good topic to dive into. Okay, James has a second question for us. Can the Tom Brady story of show stock happen? Well, Ryan and I are the worst to ask about any sports story or even Tom Brady story, but he goes on to state, my son.
Does that count?
No, those are the things.
That's the only story
we don't need to know about.
That's the only story.
No, we don't need to hear those things.
Just saying,
you understand?
That's my Tom Brady story. He's hot.
No, I'm out. My son and I were watching Monday Night Football, and I was explaining to him the story of Tom Brady, how he was overlooked and average at the college level, but went on to be the greatest of all time. It got me thinking, is this still possible for a low-budget amateur breeder or entry-level breeding project to create industry-changing animals in one generation? For example, the $1,800 average heifer that goes on to be the most incredible donor of all time. My thought is there is a better chance in the pig world than would be in the sheep, goats, or especially cow world, due to the number of offspring per year. Your thoughts, Ryan?
The one generation part throws me.
Yeah, that I would just ignore that part and just impact.
Do I think that it is possible? I'm just going to take this question a different way. Do I think it is possible for cheaper animals to win stock shows than higher price animals? Absolutely. It happens every weekend. Not saying the most expensive ones don't win sometimes, but at different shows, cheaper animals do win over more expensive animals. And that goes into the fact that, again, he's talking about an $1,800 heifer that becomes a donor. Now, I'm not saying that she can change the world in one generation, but regardless, price does not affect quality or genetics or any of those things in every situation. If you can find one that's cheap, that's great, then yeah, you're going to be able to do things with that animal. This guy's got great questions, because I think it goes into two big misconceptions that price dictates how you're going to do. I think that's a big misconception too. Does it play a factor? Is it out there? Do people spend a lot of money on livestock projects? Sure, they do. But I can also show you countless examples of people that didn't spend as much money that beat those animals year after year. So again, I think you can find ones that are reasonably priced that can make an impact, whether in the show ring or in a breeding program.
Excellent. And I'm gonna jump in here, Ryan. I'm gonna go from where you're at. I am with you 100% that if you have an unlimited budget or a large budget, that is another tool in the toolbox that you can go out there, and it's going to make you a little bit easier to find one that you can start with that's going to work. And if managed correctly and all those things, you're probably going to get along well in the show ring. It's something that's going to help. I would say it's certainly never going to hinder you,
right? Not
having a limited budget. But I think there's a difference. And again, this could be another, he's given us some nice topics here. When I think about cattle, and we'll just use that species as an example, those that really do well in the show ring, depending on how they're managed, and I'm going to make this a compliment to a lot of the cattle families out there, that those animals are managed so well in terms of feed and hair care and feet management, everything that goes into it, that it is difficult for me to know truly where that breeding potential is. Now, if you were to take their offspring and put them in the exact same management situation, you would assume they would have just as good a chance of succeeding. But maybe this is in one of those elite homes that is so anal that they're with them 24/7 and everything is taken care of and done as well as you can possibly do. That maybe those don't go on and generate for families that are maybe not that experienced or are not going to prioritize putting everything they've got into that project. And I think we see this, and he asks, is it more likely to happen in the pig world? I think that buying baby pigs, they change so much. More so, we have more of a dropout rate maybe than we do the other species in terms of one we think's really good that may not mature, and vice versa, just a nice one that matures into a really good one. I think those things are happening. And I think you break it down into two separate sets. Can we have success in the show ring with a lesser dollar amount? Absolutely. And Ryan clarified that. I think we even have a better chance of having more success in terms of the impact genetically or the breeding impact those animals can have, depending on how you're mating those. In my mind, the animal that wins a show isn't necessarily the best breeding piece.
Amen.
They're two separate entities, and maybe the misconception is that animal that wins, that's the best breeding piece. We need to buy her, breed like to like, and we could go on forever about that. But I think there's some breeding pieces out there that are not very expensive, that are overlooked, that you're going to have to reach out and take some risk, because maybe the gametes won't come together like you would like them to from each side of the equation. But I think there's huge potential. And we go back to that Tom Brady story, from breeding potential and impact on a breed. Absolutely. They can come from animals that are lesser expensive. And a lot of times those breeding pieces aren't the ones that you're going to drag into the show ring, because maybe they have 75% perfect, but they're missing that one piece, and it's going to get beat up on the show ring where they still have a lot to contribute to a breeding program. So I think a good question, maybe if we don't forget, maybe a good topic at some point. The last question, Ryan, we've addressed this from a lot of different angles, and I think even had an episode on it early on, and we're going to continue to recycle some of those episodes and look at them from a different angle. But this question kind of addresses that a little bit. And I've heard this from more than just the one that was submitted, more so in person than what I get submitted to us. But Jennifer asks, my question is about politics and the junior show ring. As a parent that has been involved in this industry for a long time, I worry that I'm seeing more of the political advantage coming into play each year. I know you have addressed this in the past, but I wanted to bring it up again to get people to just think about doing what's right and not what may benefit them or a business associate. What are your thoughts on getting people to talk about this or to bring this to light?
Well, I think we've had a whole topic on this. We've brought this up on numerous different podcasts, whether through question and answer or other things like that. So we're doing all we can to address this issue. And I agree with her. I think it was a her you said that, yeah, politics in the show ring is more prevalent than ever before. And does it need to change? Absolutely, it needs to change. The problem is, and again, I don't know how to fix it, but the problem is that I go back to the fact, until this woman and more people like her and families have a say in judges, the politics in the show ring is not going to change, because the judges that are judging right now, some are political, some are not. They're accepted, and they're going to get more and more jobs. And that cycle is just something that's never going to be broken unless something absolutely detrimental happens when that person is sorting a show. That person that's got to that level is going to continue to get jobs, and just something catastrophic happens. Do you agree with that, Dale?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I don't even want to add to it or take away. That is absolute. And
it doesn't matter how they got there or whether they deserve to get there. They're there, and they're going to judge, and they're going to continue to judge. Because
some deserve, some political, right, some not political,
and
some not deserve.
I'm not saying all the judges are political or all of them not. And I'm not saying all of them deserve to be judged and don't. That's not the thing. They're accepted. They're in that rotation, and they're going to stay there unless a catastrophic event happens for the people that hired the judges to say, hey, maybe this isn't quite such a good idea, unless the show families get a voice in who they want judging. And I've said that 1,000,000 times. I'm going to continue to say it 1,000,000 times. We're the only industry where the customer's always right in every other industry except ours, because none of these families get a vote in the judge, which is at the end game, probably the biggest, most important factor of the thing. I don't know how to change it other than that. Is because the families that do this are in the trenches every single weekend showing, talking to other families about their experience and what that happened at a show they weren't at. They are the ones in the know, far more than any show management person ever could be. And that is not the show management's fault. They're not supposed to, go to shows and all that other stuff. That's why the voice of the people needs to be heard.
So well stated. Absolutely. I'm going to use an example, and maybe it's good, maybe it's not, and throw myself under the bus a little bit. Ryan, I'm going to go back the Badger Brawl this past weekend that I had the privilege of sorting the heifer show. And I've been focused on raising some cattle or putting genetics together to try to make some difference in the Angus ring and maybe some of the other breeds for several years now, and really focused on that. I have not been focused on, our kids have shown some steers, and we've been out there and active on the show side, but I've been more of my time is trying to put the genetic pieces together to accomplish what I consider an end goal. And was asked to judge the show up in Wisconsin. And I get up there and there's 400 plus breeding heifers. And I can honestly tell you, and I'm going to use this as an example because I can't imagine it happens very often. It happens to you, Ryan, because you're traveling and doing so many shows. But for the most part, you're not going to see this happen much. I recognized over the microphone when they would announce the how people did in class, I'd recognize that some of the names, no question. That's impossible not to. But I can tell you that there wasn't a single exhibitor of the 400 plus animals exhibited that I knew by face recognition or could even tell you who they were. And that's not going to happen very often, because normally those people that are hired to judge, and rightfully so, are breeders, and they've maybe known these families because they've sold to them. That's a situation that worked really well, and it's very refreshing for me that you can go in there and just sort the animals. You're not there is zero concern for anything else, and that's how it should always be. But it sure makes it easier when you just don't know anybody. It's like if I get a chance to, or when I've had an opportunity to judge in other countries, you don't have a clue who these people are, and you just go in and sort livestock and there's nothing else in your head. It just makes it that much easier. Ryan, you can go out and do that from the standpoint that right now you've stopped brokering. For the most part, you individually aren't breeding and selling. What you do in the show ring isn't having a huge financial impact in your life. Can we agree on that?
No, I'm in zero.
You can go out and sort the stock without anything in the back of your mind subconsciously saying, wow, if I beat this one, they may not buy from me 2 or 3 years down the road, or this or that. There's a lot of those things that come into play, guys, and it's hard. So Ryan stated it so well. I should have just left it alone, because those that are in the trenches, they know the connections, they understand all those things. And knowing all those things, guess what that list of judges becomes, Ryan? Pretty short.
Mm-hmm.
Because of those things. And that's not a bad thing. And I think about the group that are out there judging, the ones that really are able to go out there and do a subjective, can go out there and sort without all the negative coming into play. It's not a very long list, and that's hard. And sometimes it's because of financial reasons and trying to put food on the table for your family. And this is the business that you're in, and there's decisions that are made because you want to continue to survive financially. There's so much that comes into play that it's a challenge, and it is. But Ryan stated it so well. We can't expect show management to know all of this. It's impossible. But those in the trenches need to speak up, need to have a vote. However, and Ryan put it so well, we just, that is the only way, in going back to Jennifer's question, that you're going to see some of that change.
It's the only way.
And it is what it is. Yep. And there's so many good things that are coming from it, but can we do better there? We can. Absolutely. Ryan, we went a little longer than I thought this episode might, but with that, I appreciate your time. And until next week, be safe.
Y'all come back now, you hear?